Hey guys, my name is Zoe Caesar, and today we will be learning about the periodic table. The periodic table is an arrangement of elements, and they are arranged by the number of protons. When you're looking across the periodic table, as you go from left to right, you see that they are increasing. The numbers at the top, those are the protons. So it increases by the rows. And the rows are also called the periods. And if you're going from top to bottom, you have the groups, and that's also referred to as the family. So the rows go left to right, and the groups go top to bottom. Let's look at the element breakdown. Every time you see an element on the periodic table, you will see this. You will see the element name, then you will see the atomic number. So this is the atomic number. That's the number of protons, and it's also the number of electrons. The number of electrons. And then next you will see the atomic symbol, and lastly you will see the atomic mass, which is down here. And the atomic mass is also called the mass number. And it is an average mass. So with what we've just learned, what can we do with this information? Well, we can determine the number of neutrons. And that is important because the neutrons and the protons together, they make up the nucleus. And the nucleus is in the center of the atom. So the nucleus is in the center of the atom. So those two combined make up the nucleus, so it's great to figure out the number of neutrons. To figure out the number of neutrons, you have that the neutrons are equal to the mass number minus the number of protons. And that's it. That is how you calculate the number of neutrons. And you can also calculate the mass number if you take the number of neutrons and you add that to the number of protons, but you must be given the number of neutrons. So the number of neutrons, it must be given because it is a calculated number and not something that you can just find anywhere. So let's do an example of how you would calculate the protons, the neutrons, and the mass number for any element given on the periodic table. Here we have nitrogen, and so the number of protons in nitrogen is 7 because we see that is its atomic number. Its atomic number is 7. That's the same thing as the number of protons. The mass number is 14.01. We see that right here. And you can round two numbers after the decimal place, so that's why it's 14.01. And lastly, the number of neutrons. So what we do is we take the mass number, we're going to round it to a whole number to make it easier to subtract. And we're going to subtract the number of protons, and we get 7. So that is how many neutrons we have in nitrogen. And this is how you can find out the number of protons, the number of neutrons, and the mass number for any given element on the periodic table. Isotopes. So when you're talking about isotopes, I think we should look at this picture down here with the lithiums. Looking at the picture, you can see that there are 3 different types of lithium. So when you have an element written out like this, the numbers at the bottom So the 3's here, they represent the number of protons. So they represent the number of protons, while the numbers at the top, like the 6, the 7, and the 8, they represent the mass number. So these lithiums all have the same number of protons, and their mass number is different. So if we look at our equation, we have the mass number is equal to the protons plus the neutrons. Well, if our protons are remaining constant, the only thing that can affect the mass number is the number of neutrons. So the definition of an isotope is an element that has the same number of protons but different number of neutrons. Thus, the mass number would also be different. Valence electrons. Valence electrons are the electrons in the outermost energy level, and they are the reason chemical reactions happen. So to find out how many valence electrons an element will have, you go to the periodic table and you look at the group number. So if you were to look at group 1, for example, elements in group 1 would have 1 valence electron. If you were to look at group 8, elements in group 8 would have 8 valence electrons. If you were to look in group 5, they would have 5 valence electrons, and so on and so on. And one thing you should note is helium right here. Helium is in group 8, but it only has 2 valence electrons. And that's because helium is a noble gas, and all the elements in group 8 are noble gases, but helium is the only element that has 2 valence electrons. The rest of them do have 8. And that is just something you need to be aware of. Lastly, let's talk about the Bohr model of the atom. So it's just a way to represent an atom, and you draw the nucleus and you put electrons and rings around the nucleus. In the very last ring, will tell you how many valence electrons are in the atom. So right here, that's the nucleus. It is comprised of the protons and the neutrons. Now, if we look at this last energy level, we can count the number of electrons, and that will tell us the number of valence electrons. So let's go ahead and count them. So we have 2, 4, 6, and 8. So this atom has 8 valence electrons. So now let's draw an example of a Bohr model for an element on the periodic table. Let's do carbon. So carbon has, its mass number is 12, and it has 6 protons. So that means that we have 6 protons, 6 electrons, and if we subtract the mass number from the number of protons, we also have 6 neutrons. So let's go ahead and draw out the model. So we have the protons and the neutrons, and there's our nucleus. So let's draw the first energy level. The first energy level can only have 2 electrons maximum. So we can go ahead and draw those 2 electrons. Here's 1, and there's 2. So let's draw the second energy level, because we have 6 electrons to place and we've only placed 2 out of the 6. This second energy level can have up to 8 electrons maximum, but we only need 4 left, so we can go ahead and draw out those 4. So we have 1, 2, 3, and then 4. So based from this, we see that carbon has 4 valence electrons, meaning that it's in group 4, which if you look on the periodic table, that is correct. So thank you guys for watching. I hope this video was informative and that it helped you out. Bye!